Okay. Hi. Hey. How are you? Good to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Yes. My gosh. I didn't know. I forgot. You lived in Dubai. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
When I see your image and your workshop,
Yes.
I said immediately I will register to see you,
Good. Good.
and we will talk about the same road.
Silk Road.
Yeah.
Yeah. The the ancient trade that is associated with China.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. I just won't look at you.
ولا هذا محجوز ولا ايش؟ هذا محجوز ولا ايش؟ مريح المكان ولا تنزل لتحت شوي؟ اكيد لانه هيك. عرفت؟ بدك في مكان هيك.
Hi.
Hi. Do you need any help? Sure.
I think I'm ready to go. Yeah. Anytime?
No.
All right. Do I get it?
You are now.
All right. Do I get an introduction? All right.
Would you like me to introduce you?
National Geographic photographer, I guess,
Yeah.
on the Silk Road. Whatever you like.
And this is Palda. And this is Palda.
No, nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming today for our lectures. And we would like to welcome Mike. Thank you for coming, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think who is following up or who is following our social media, you know that Mike is one of our judges, and the judging process is going on these days. Then you can imagine, yeah, what's his situation today exactly. Yeah, I don't need actually to introduce Mike. He's one of the famous photographers here, and he will talk to us about a very interesting subject today. I hope you enjoy. Please don't forget to take your certificates while you are outside. A lot of you know already our system. We will have 2 counters, and it will count from 1 to 1 number, and it will count for the other rest of the numbers. Please align to where your number is. Yeah, there is something important Ronald was mentioned now, that the lecture will be in English. Whoever wants a translation, we have a live translation. Please don't hesitate to ask for headset if you didn't take one already from outside. If you have questions, we will have also some time for questions.
I hope so.
And you can also ask in Arabic or English. We have also the translation here. They can translate on both sides. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy your evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. For those of you who may not know my work, I am an Asia specialist. So I like to tell my editors at National Geographic that they should send me only where they serve rice. And occasionally I get a break. In this case, the Silk Road. I was following an Asian explorer, and fortunately here in Dubai you serve rice, so I got to come here many times during the course of my travels. I'm going to take you on the Silk Road. I did 2 stories that allowed me to travel both the land Silk Road and the Sea Silk Road. Of course, Silk Road is associated with China. Silk was traded as well as many other goods, and also the cross-cultural connections that were made along the route are all extremely important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history, but more about what the story behind the picture. This is a photography workshop. I'm judging the world's most generous photo contest. The HEPA contest is world famous for its very generous amount of prize money. But anyway, so I'm here to talk, we're talking about photography, and so I'm going to show you these pictures from a photographer's point of view. So how many have heard of Marco Polo? Yeah, everybody's heard of Marco Polo. Well, I'm going to actually I'll tell you exactly how the evening's going to go. The first half of the show will be about Marco Polo's overland travel from Venice to China, which he did in the 13th century, the end of 1270 or something like that. He traveled overland and is known as the world's greatest overland traveler. So I'm going to take you there, and then we're going to take a break for, I don't know, about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to take you back along the Sea Silk Road, following another explorer by the name of Zheng He. How many have heard of Zheng He? Well, Zheng He was a 15th century Chinese explorer who explored the entire known world before the Age of Discovery, where Vasco da Gama and Magellan and all those guys went to China. Before that time, there was a guy by the name of Zheng He, Chinese admiral, who did all those trips beforehand. So let's start with Marco Polo. Anyway, I think the route is self-explanatory. It takes them 4 years to get there. Let's go. National Geographic, geography, so we shoot a lot of aerials. And the point of this picture is the footprint of Venice today is the same footprint as it existed from the 10th century. So I was up there in a helicopter. Let's just put that here. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we spend a lot of material, and this picture is the fact that it is exactly the same footprint as it was 700 years ago. By the way, the reason why we decided to do this story is because somewhere in the late 90s, a book came out by the head of the British Library questioning, did Marco Polo go to China? And so we thought we should prove that whether he did or did not go. So here's the Grand Canal. There's no big boats, no vaporetta in the middle of the canal. Well, that's planned it to be that way. And I went to Venice during a period called the festival, the Regatta Storico, where we knew there was going to be no big boats on the canal. I chose my location. The point of this also is that photographers have the vision here before they put it on film, whether it be in an instant or in this case planned weeks, months in advance. I knew that I had to be here on this day to shoot this picture that gave a sense or a feel of what Venice must have been like 1200s. Now, we all have the problem of going to a place that's been photographed a million times before. And how many people have seen pictures of San Marco Square? It's important for a story because Marco Polo left between these two columns, which were here when he left in whatever it was, 1270 something. And so I needed a picture of those two columns. And so I had this idea as I was sitting there one day and watching these huge ships coming down. So I planned to be here when this ship, which at the time was the largest cruise ship ever built, the Grand Princess, and I knew that exactly at 10 o'clock on such a date in September to come down the canal. The problem was, this is it. Of course, it was late. So I was set up on the square, and I had a ladder, and the police came and said, you're not allowed to have this ladder on the San Marco Square. So they asked me to move it, and while I told my fixer, my assistant, to make sure that they do not kick us off the square because I need this picture. So she's arguing. This is Marisa, who's quite attractive, and she was arguing with these policemen, saying, don't worry, it'll be a few minutes or whatever. And this ship came into view, and everybody turned around, and it blew its horn, and all those birds took to the air, and click, click, click. I had my picture. Photographers are paid to be lucky. And of course, we shoot many pictures in order to tell the story. So I was out there the next morning with my assistant throwing rocks at the birds in the air, the pigeons in the air. But a year later, I went back and I found my photograph on a T-shirt. Somebody had ripped it off. And this is the age of the internet, and so they were selling this selling T-shirt, and I asked, hey, that's my photograph, and they said, okay, well, I'll give you a discount if you buy a lot of them. So this is the Mappo Mundo. I wanted you to just take a look at this because by this map, there are people who believe that Zheng He made this map. This is a map of the ancient world. Actually, it's hard to read because everything is upside down. But the point of it is that the great explorers of the Age of Discovery, Magellan and Vasco da Gama, and those guys actually went to Asia from a map supplied by this 15th century Admiral Zheng He. And the funny thing is, it's in Italy, and in Italy they live with their history. So I asked where the famous map was, and this guy at the Venice Library turns around, and the wind's blowing in through a window, and he just whips back the curtain, and there it is. If this was anywhere else in the world, it'd be under museum conditions and air-controlled, air conditioning, and you'd never see it like this. Okay, so this is the beginning of the Silk Road. It's on the border of Turkey and Kurdistan, Iraqi Kurdistan. So this is the way all explorers went, and so we headed to to Iraq through this road. And in Kurdistan, so Marco Polo said, be careful in Kurdistan because it's a dangerous place. There are a lot of bandits. And to cut out the 20th century while I was shooting, of course, the beauty of photography is you just limit by what's in the frame. So you have this picture of a Kurdish wedding. This miserable looking guy here is the groom. And the white stuff is actually shaving cream. So he said, yes, when you go to Kurdistan, you have to go well armed. And this goes to today. We use this to illustrate that point. In fact, I read the book, I read several versions of it, and made notes. Everything he said, everything Marco Polo wrote about, and made a shoot list according to that. So I needed to shoot something with people with weaponry, and these are the guests at the wedding who just happened to be carrying AK-47s or Uzi machine guns, whatever it is. And again, cutting out the 20th century by my framing. So in Iraq, one of the rules is you can't shoot from a high place because they don't want you to discover at that time, any Saddam Hussein gun emplacements or weapons of mass destruction or palaces, but I'm there always to test my minder. The difference between a minder and a fixer. Well, a minder in a country like Iraq and often in places like China before 2004, you travel with a government designated person who would tell you what you could and could not shoot and what you could or could not see or do. In the case of a fixer that I've mentioned before, a fixer is who we hire in the field to, I always like to say, put the subject in front of the lens. They act as the interpreter, they do coordination, they get you hotels and cars and food and everything else, and so you depend on them a lot. But in this case, I'm working with a minder, and he says, no photographs from a high place. So there was this tall minaret in Mosul. This is Mosul. And I said, do you mind if I just go up and take a look? And he says, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I'm going up this very dark, narrow stairway, and I see him falling really far behind. He had claustrophobia. So I ran up to the top of the stairs, shot pictures in every direction, and by the time I got up there, he said, no picture. He said, that's it. And we went down and we published this picture in the story as to what a 13th century town in Iraq looks like, which looks pretty much exactly the way it was in Marco Polo's time. I didn't see any weapons of mass destruction, however, or buses for that matter. Marco Polo, of course, talks about religion, and so here I am at Saifuddin Mosque, the main mosque in Baghdad. He called Baghdad the City of Domes for obvious reasons. And this is the domes that Saddam built. This is the tomb of the unknown soldier. It's to honor the dead in the Iraq-Iran war, where many, many people died. But I just want to show you from a photography point of view, this white granite allows you to shoot in midday. Notice how small the shadows are. I'm shooting it, this adage that you're not allowed or you shouldn't shoot in the middle of the day. Well, here it really worked shooting in the middle of the day because the light bounces from here into all these faces. And the main problem, therefore, was just to fix the arrangement of where these groups of people. So, rules made to be broken. And Marco Polo is a merchant, so he's always interested in what he can buy and sell. And so here we are in the gold souk. This is the days before digital, by the way. So our cameras are like this. You point and shoot with your eye up to a finder. And of course now we have wonderful digital cameras that now allow you not only to shoot in dark areas like this. This is probably Kodachrome 200, which is and pushed a lot in order to be able to shoot in here. But of course now with digital cameras you can shoot almost in the dark. And the point is that now you have these screens. You shoot from the back of the camera, and this is a tremendous change for me, for a lot of us, because this, everybody looks at you. This, shooting from here, nobody seems to care. So Muslim cloth from Mosul became important, so I'm photographing this in the in the souk. And this spiral minaret. I use this as an example to show you how poor the Iraqis were in a country where the gasoline was about 8 cents a liter. They needed to have hand crank this Ferris wheel in order to run it. And I also want to say that Iraq is such a rich place for antiquities. Tower of Babel exists there, Garden of Eden exists there, that when things get better, it'll be a great tourist attraction. And I throw this in here also because we, the news does not allow for pictures of everyday life, and as everywhere, kids are the same. They jump rope, they play Marco Polo games, and anyway, everything's normal. So I went to Saddam Hussein's birthday in Tikrit, and so there were these whirling dervishes, and I photographed it, but he never showed up, which is why he stayed alive for so long. Wherever he was supposed to be, the press would go, but he never actually made the scene. And I show this to Western audiences. By the way, this is the first time I'm actually showing a set of pictures here in the Middle East. And I show this, and they're so surprised that there's Christianity in Iraq, the Nestorian Christians. And there are quite a few of them. I wonder how. The other thing is, we always wonder after being here. I was pretty much the only photographer who spent a lot of time between the two wars. And who knows what happened to all these friends that I made at the time. And there's no way for me to know unless I, some reason, get to go back. So the Marsh Arabs in Basra. Maybe this is Saddam Hussein's biggest crime, because this is a 5,000-year-old civilization that the Geographic story. Can everybody hear me? The point is that this 5,000-year-old civilization no longer exists because Saddam drained these on which these people depend for a living, and they live in these incredible reed houses. Maybe one of the last, because once there's no way that the reeds can grow. Of course, he drained the swamps because you can't run tanks in the mud, so they got rid of the swamp for this civilization. Basra, it's a treasure trove of Arab architecture going to ruin. I point out for another reason, in order to get light on that facade. So then I go to Iran, and Yazd, obviously mosques. This was, and I only have maybe about this much space on that roof to choose my shooting position. And again, by some luck, the sun decides to go down the dome, and click, I had my picture. And again, serendipity, photography, need to be lucky, and anyway, it works out. Has anybody been to Iran? Anybody to travel to Iran now? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, this was it's funny how these stories, you end up doing these stories, and the way it works is, in my case, I happened to be the luckiest guy in order to be able to access all these countries in a period when nobody else was able to. And thanks to the geographic and the fact that we do cultural stories, nobody was thinking that we were going to do anything that would be harmful to them. So we got permission to shoot in all these places when where even Amanpour could not go. So shooting inside a hammam, which is very hot, and you have to be very careful with your cameras. Again, it'd be great to go back there with a camera. It'd be so much simpler than shooting with film. So this is BAM. BAM was the world's largest citadel, and when Marco Polo came through, he talked about the lofty walls of BAM. This part here, all of this actually got destroyed in an earthquake a few years ago. But I just wanted you to remember this because I focused on the wall, the lofty walls of mud. It's about 100 foot. In proving whether Marco Polo went to China or not had a lot to do with this wall, which I'll explain later. But he spoke about this one because it obviously was very impressive. And we sent these pictures to their efforts to rebuild this ruin, which they are planning to do. We sent these photographs to show what it looked like before the earthquake. So this is when I started really to believe in Marco Polo. Actually, when I started out, I was also skeptical. But with this methodology, we would, and what he wrote, in this particular area, he talked about a hot spring that was good for the itch. And so we would go into a village and ask around. Well, there was this guy who was here 700 years ago, and he talks about a hot spring that runs through the desert. And of course, you'd get somebody who would just, I don't know that. And then you'd go down another 10 kilometers, and you ask the same question, and somebody goes, oh, another kilometer or two, turn right, and there's a hot spring. And sure enough, just exactly where he said it would be, I find this green water running through the middle of the desert. And if you're ever going to shoot colored water like in the tropics or stuff like this, shoot it in midday and you get this amazing color. But this is when I started really believing, because so many things he was saying were exactly typical thing here where we know there's a subject in this town of Bandar Abbas, and Marco Polo talks about black-skinned people because they were the descendants of slaves. So I went there specifically to shoot this town, Bandar Abbas, for the interesting hijab, which I knew I would find there, and I spent the day shooting all these women in windows against adobe backgrounds, and I'm packing up my gear for the day, and I've got a camera here and my camera bag. I'm walking back, and I look down, and there's this woman who's on the stream, and she just turns around to see me, and I go click, 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 and all those other pictures that I shot were put in the trash, and this is what we ran on the cover. That's photography. So he says, Marco Polo says it's so hot in Iran that most of the residents spend their time in water up to their neck, and this is a perfect example. And there are a lot of pictures that you take just because you're there. It has nothing to do with Marco Polo, but it sure was a nice net picture. And so I'm out there in the Gulf looking for Arab dhows, actually, and there are none anymore. All plastic boats in Iran, and Marco Polo was looking for a boat to take him to China, so we were there and looked around for anything to photograph. There were no Arab dhows anymore. There were only these fiberglass fishing boats, so I ended up shooting a pretty picture of nets, but that's what we're there for. So he doesn't find a boat, so he has to go overland through Afghanistan. In our case, we flew in with helicopters that Massoud, the great Northern Alliance commander, had helicopters coming in and out. We flew in from Tajikistan with one of his helicopters. And this is exactly as he describes it, this high desert. Marco of Afghanistan, he loved the high altitude, and he talks about how green the country is along the rivers, and so there you have it. If you want to know how photographers stay brave in a war situation, I was there in this rickety old old Russian helicopter, and it's flying right on the tree line to avoid the car. The writer is very worried, but the photographer is shooting out the window, and I'm thinking, what a great perch this is, flying at low altitude, and I'm thinking f-stops and how to make a picture while not thinking about the dangers, but making the frame. We traveled with the Mujahideen, the leaders of Massoud's military commanders, and ate what they ate and traveled with what few cars were available at the time. The lucky thing is that this area that Marco Polo traveled through was the area that was not in control by the Taliban. So he talks about the rich wheat, and in shooting this in the middle of the wind in order to get that nice wheat being thrown back in my... This is the Shah of Wakhan. Wakhan corridor between Pakistan and Tajikistan is this small, very narrow corridor between two big... Straight ahead you go in order to get to China. So we met this guy, probably a descendant of one of Marco Polo's, of one of the kings that Marco Polo talks about, who he met when he traveled through. And this is the traditional way in which they greet each other. He talks about the fact that everyone wears the skins of animals and how poor they are. I was told that this is a dangerous picture because of the reason why everybody's wearing this burqa is that they obviously don't want to be photographed, and so when you're photographing this situation, well, it was very dangerous because the husband, if they saw it, would not be very happy. And so I was there when the supposedly last bowl of opium was being smoked as this guy, a very forward-looking Shah of Wakhan, was banning the practice of smoking opium. And so he said, would you like to see what it's like to smoke opium? And of course, that's what I'm there for. And so I shot this picture in his living room, and the light is coming down through a skylight. So the Marco Polo sheep, the Ovis poli, were so plentiful during his day when he traveled through that he says they used them, the horns, for fence posting. They would make fences out of this. Well, now it's not quite so easy. And sometimes the picture just presents itself. So I had horns and I'm shooting all over the place. I'm putting it in stream or dry riverbeds and trying to make a picture of a set of horns landscape and not having great success. And one of these kids brought me the biggest one they could find, and as they were bringing it up, I looked at that and said, there's my picture, and just had the. This is what the Wakhan corridor looks like. Hindu Kush on the right, Pamirs on the left, straight ahead China. And again, I think Afghanistan will also be a great tourist attraction. It's a beautiful country. Marco Polo loved it. He spent actually a couple of years here, malaria or some disease, but he waxes ecstatic, talks about how wonderful the air and the scenery of Afghanistan is. Across that is China. So naturally, however, we cannot cross the border going from Afghanistan into China. So we went to Beijing and came at it from the opposite side. And this is what you find on the opposite side of the Afghan border. It's a glacier. And also note that you don't need sunshine to make pictures. So this picture, this glacier glows whether it's cloudy or sunny. And Lake Karakum, Marco Polo was an icon, a Mongol leader, of course, who coveted horses and falcons. So this was a subject that all the time you would talk about who had the best horses, etc. And again, getting lucky. When you go to China, or at least in these times, I never got a choice as to when I could go. They would just say, you can come and here's your time slot. So I was really disappointed to hear that I was going to go in like April, between seasons, so there wouldn't be any green. And I was thinking, man, this is going to be a bust because there's nothing colorful to shoot. But what I got was a freak snowstorm in the middle of a dry, high desert. It was surprising for these people as well. I'm in a little town and we're changing the hubs so we can have four-wheel drive, and everybody came out to look at this snow. And thank God for that guy with the red umbrella. If you put your hand on, cut out the red umbrella, it loses a lot. And again, photographer's luck. That guy walks into the picture with an umbrella, and again, I have my photograph. We don't send up pictures. We shoot it the way it is. We don't direct. I don't tell somebody with a red umbrella to walk in the middle of the frame. And during the contest, this has been a debate whether the photograph is real or not, whether the photograph is set up or not. So we've seen a lot of setups. You don't have to buy my lens, Marco Polo crossing the Pamirs in the middle of the winter. And here it is, this guy walks into the frame, camel with donkey, and click. I had my picture. So now we're near that border, that Afghan border, and here's these people that we found living there. They're Tajiks. They're actually ethnic Afghans who got caught on the wrong side, or maybe the right side of the border. When China closed its border in 1949, these guys actually worked out for them much better because they have peace and relative prosperity compared to what's going on the other side, on the Afghan side of the border. And so we're in this village, and here's these kids going to obviously it's very dry there. This is the source of water. But the interesting thing for us was the women, and therefore the little girls, all wore red, and the boys all wear blue. The other thing I'm going to point out about this picture is, so you wonder, why aren't these at this age? Why aren't they making faces at me? Why aren't they posing and looking at the photographer who's standing in front of them with a lens? Well, if you also look at the shadow, it's sunrise, and there's this big sun behind me. So they can't even see me. They look this way towards me, and they see this big sun. It's too bright, so they're not going to look there. And so I'm taking advantage of this and shooting these kids where they're very naturally sitting there preparing for their lessons of the day. And photographers try and control their luck by taking every advantage of where the good light's going to be. So I'm here at sunrise. This is going into Kashgar, which Marco Polo called the greatest market in the world, and arguably still the biggest market, certainly in Asia. And so I'm on the road as the carts are going into the city. Unfortunately, in many of these photographs you can't see anymore because they banned the horse carts in the middle of Kashgar now, so there's no way you can actually see this picture. But the point there, my job is to recreate a feeling of what it was like in 700 years ago. So I'm looking for timeless scenes that allow me to, well, in this case, obviously without cars, so I can show this vision of what it was like. So these are Uyghurs. They are Muslim. They are from, this is Marco Polo describes them, Central Asia. He is very good at describing religion and tribes that he meets along the way. They have a different sense of body space, and this is the way they like to bargain in the market, very up close and personal. And the advantage to the photographer is they don't even see me. They're so intent on me and whatever they're trying to buy or sell that they totally ignore me, and I'm only about 3 feet away and just clicking away. They don't even know that I'm there. Silk, so I'm there shooting silk and everywhere I can find it. This is a still traditional way of making silk, using boiling silkworms like this. And winding it onto a spindle, the threads, the silk threads. But again, luck. I'm sitting there shooting this mother, and the son comes into view and wants to help mom, and I get this frame. Same with this. I'm shooting this falcon, this falconer. There are very few of them left, but of course it's an important subject for me because Marco Polo describes who has the best falcons. And so I'm shooting this guy, and I'm having him throw the bird up. I'm shooting portraits. I'm doing all these different photographs, And then this kid just walks into the back of the frame, click, I had my picture. But I'll give you an idea of what layout is all about. So I had this picture, and I had this one, so they couldn't run both because they're too similar. Different subject, similar look. So which one did we run? I think it was this one. He had the pleated skirts, worn these Tajik women, the quilted silk. I think that's where he got his idea. And so the question is, did Marco Polo bring pasta and ravioli to China, or did he take jiaozi and lanzhou and take it to Italy? What do you think? What's your guess? Okay, well, pasta was invented by the Persians, and Arab traders took it everywhere in the world, somewhere around the 10th century. He mentioned pasta. He never mentioned lanzhou, so he took a lot of pictures of noodles. We're at the edge of the Taklamakan Desert, and so I need to follow Marco Polo now, the route as he goes into China. Going to spend the next 17 years in China, so I'm going to take you through not only the route of going to Chengdu, which is Kublai Khan, but also I'm going to take you in and around China and some of the travels that he did while he was there. He became the emissary. So, important picture, crossing the Taklamakan. He describes the sand dunes and the sound that the wind makes as it goes over the top of the sand dunes. And to this day, these are the singing sand dunes of Dunhuang, kept the name. So I must make a picture here. And I get there, and there are hundreds of tourists. Maybe it was a tourist attraction even in Marco Polo's days, what I'm guessing. All group number so-and-so, your camels are ready, come join and take a ride. So I'm just going like, what am I going to do here? Have numbers, big yellow numbers, that's 5, 1, showing Marco Polo crossing the desert. So I got in the car, the Land Rover, and we're moving around to the left. And it's about 4 o'clock, so the sun is cresting over the hill. And I see my picture. I silhouetted the camels, so you can't see that that's 21, 48, 62, 95, and 110. You think that's Marco Polo crossing the Taklamakan, where it's 5, 1, 2, 3 days. I shoot far in order to get this layering of the mountains. And there's a whole bunch of photographers here shooting the same thing. They're all down below. That reason, if there's a there, that is either the best position or the worst position. But my thinking is, I don't want a picture that looks like everybody else's. So if they're at the bottom of the, know what they're shooting, because they're shooting up. They're not getting in this mountains. In this case, I moved back, went to the highest mountain behind the large group of photographers and took this picture. And then, of course, came for a lower view. I also like to catch a ladder in order to get this layering shot from just the ground, you'd only see the first run of the horses. So, a ladder is something that I typically carry on the top of the truck. Again, luck. Got a sandstorm, and Polo talks a lot about sandstorms, and actually be in the middle of one and take a picture is great. And of course, people are saying, don't take pictures in sandstorms, as they don't take pictures in the rain, don't take pictures in snow because you're going to ruin your camera. Well, professional photographers don't think that way, and I can't wait for that kind of storm in order to get this kind of frame. I'm in the Mogawa Caves. Polo again, another subject, and I'm going to shoot this big Buddha, reclining Buddha inside the cave. So I am negotiating with the Chinese government, who wants to charge me $200 per square meter to take a picture in. So I'm looking at this situation, and I've got a zoom lens on my tripod, and there's a guy there with a tape measure from the government who's waiting to see what I'm going to shoot so he can charge me. So I've zoomed to right around here, and he's looking through there, and he goes, okay, measures it out, and he tells me I owe him $1,000. So as he's walking back and winding up his tape measure, I come out and shoot this $10,000 picture. My battle that day. And incidentally, again, dealing with minders, there's a huge difference. These are the days in China where you only had a minder. So then there was a question of how to light it, and as you can hear, but they said no strobes and no hot lights. So I'm going like, well, how can I light this thing? So we took the mirrors, the walls of our hotel room, and brought them over to this cave, and I learned something, because the light from a stays bunched, doesn't change and go wide, it stays as a beam. So I bounced from the outside into this one, and took this picture of. So when we get to Mongolia, which is where Kublai Khan resides, he's a Mongolian. Very difficult at this period to find horses, but luckily enough we find them, and I'm riding a motorcycle here in order to get these photographs. This is what they do. They were doing a spring roundup, and they, the Mongolian cowboys, lasso the horse by using these big poles with a rope on the end, but then they take the tail and they whip it to the ground, and then they inoculate them and cut the hair or do whatever they need to do for the horse. So you saw that wall that I showed you in Dam. Now that was a 100-foot high, 30, 40 meter high wall. This is the wall of Polo, which is the Han Dynasty wall, and it's more than 10 feet high. Why would you care about talking about the Great Wall of China when the Great Wall that he saw was just great? And there's the other mystery, the major argument that Marco Polo never got to China to the Great Wall. Well, why would you? So, of course, I shot a lot of the Great Wall, and here I am shooting this less than 3 meter wall. happened to catch a shepherd on the top. That's the wall right there. And it's a sandstorm, so you get this nice warm sandy air. But the main reason I took this picture is I never saw a camel used as a plow to plow a field. That's the Great Wall back there. Of course, the Bactrian camel, the two-hump camel, which I don't think resides around this part of the world. And so here I'm standing on the top of the wall. So this is this huge relic, cultural, historical relic, which the Chinese could care less about, especially in this area of China. So the wall here runs as the back of sheep pens. And so they cut a hole right through the middle of the wall and let the sheep out. So I got the bright idea of standing on top, and it's funny, since then I've seen this picture done by a lot of people who are copying it, but I was the first. So that's the Great Wall of China. That's the one you know. This is the Ming, 300 years after Marco Polo. And the grand half of Kublai Khan, who wants him to report on all the Mongols at the time owned every bit of real estate between China and Poland. They literally owned the world. I mean, and they hardly ever, they just didn't know how much they had. So this was Marco Polo's job, was to travel the provinces and come back and describe what it looked like. The Grand Canal and these tow lines used where coolies pull the boats up the canal against the current. And again, photographer's luck. I'm there at the right time of day. That's the one thing I can control, is I'm going to be there at sunset. And who knew that just as the sun is setting and you got this nice ray of orange coming across the canal, this woman decides to walk carrying this 2 buckets. And I had my picture. And of course, now you can't shoot this because there's a fence on either side, and they're going to charge you major admission just to be out there. And he goes to Suzhou. These are very familiar places to me. This is and told a million lies. So anyway, it's true. They harvest the fish out of this lake 2 or 3 times a year. I'm there just to shoot that, and I jump on a boat offshore, come over here, jump on a boat that they're going to load this fish into and get this picture. He discussed paper money of interest. Other things he didn't mention was bound feet. So I'm looking for people with these little feet, bound feet. And the government does not want me to shoot this because they think it was a primitive practice. And of course, it ended about 100 years ago, but they never got the word in rural China. So still find them, at least you could 10 years ago. Maybe they're completely disappeared. But I got lucky, and the taxi driver that was driving us around said, "Oh, well, I'll take you to my village. My grandma has the smallest feet in the village." And again, you're always thinking, envisioning your photograph. So I had this idea that I'd have these 2 women sitting here, and I'd take this portrait, and then I'd have their relatives around with normal feet so you could see the difference. And I did a whole variations, but the whole time that we're doing this, I'm shooting. So I set these 2 chairs up, and as they were about to sit down for this session, I get this frame. We looked at all of them and thought this was the best, most natural, and showed the feet. to be the smallest, and that's how we end this picture. I do believe he about bound feet in the way he describes how Chinese women walk. And he said the women walk with tiny steps, one in front of the other, and that describes exactly how a bound foot woman walks. Talked about the people with gold teeth. So I would go to this village and say, "Can you show me your teeth?" And it was a very easy picture because all I had to do was have them smile and click. So I had my frame. He talks about people eating raw meat. Unfortunately, I had no idea they really was talking about eating raw pig, which of course, we're told that you never eat raw pig because there is a worm associated with it called trichinosis. You can get very sick. But I looked at the people around me who were all quite well fed and looked very healthy. So I was there when they slaughtered the pigs, and then they burn off the hair in order to expose the skin, and then they just slice into it and eat this meat. He described it as tasting like chili garlic. And guess what? That's exactly the way it tastes, because that's what they dip this meat in. Couldn't tell if it's pig or beef or camel. It just tastes like chili and garlic. He goes to the Mekong River. He talks about these huge gorges. This project looks like it ended up as a book and as a documentary, other than the magazine story. But what seems like a seamless trip actually is done and pieced together later. So I think we shot. I didn't shoot linear going from Venice to Turkey to. It looks like a seamless trip, but we do these in different stages. Also, I get to come home every once in a while in the middle of the trip to get a change of clothes and say hello to my wife. This is all in Yunnan, southern China. I spend a lot of time there because this is the area of most minorities, the largest number of minorities in China. These are the Dai people. And again, he's describing religion. So everywhere I'm going, I'm shooting on my shoot list every religion and religious ceremony I can find. Mekong River. He goes to Cambodia. And so a picture like this looks very, but again, a lot of these photographs have separation. So to get this picture of these guys who are beating the water and therefore driving fish to the nets, you need the separation between the water and this background, which is, if you're shooting against the sun, it's going to be black. So if I was shooting from the water level, I would just see black against black, and you wouldn't see this. So I've hired the highest, tallest boat I can find, and on top of that I had, I think it was bed springs on top of that in order to get the height, in order to separate these two boats and separate from this dark background. Again, you envision the photograph that you want and execute, and that's the way most photographs are made. It also happens that instant you see the photograph, and within a millisecond you grab it that way. In this case, though, I planned this one out. And again, lucky, I'm standing there on the Mekong River. It's very shallow, and these guys just walking across on a sandbar. But the point is that I'm waiting, I'm ready, I'm working the best light. Every sunrise, every sunset, I have some position where I'm going to park myself to shoot and see what happens. And so he goes to the Tibetan plateau. My goal is there to the top. We're already high up, so it's pretty flat once you're up at the top, but you're up about 15,000 feet, 4,000 meters, 5 meters. And lucky, again, rain comes on stupas. These are all over Tibet. This is, they put these stupas, chorten, in sacred places, and it made it very sacred by just seeing this double rainbow come down and whack right on the top. These are prayer flags, so that one of my passions has been Tibet. In the last 5 years, I've been doing a lot of stuff in Tibet, and that's the way we work, is you have a passion about something, and you go back again and again, and I ended up doing four stories on Tibet, and now have a book on that subject. And you get to know the culture intimately, and that's the way you make good pictures. But these prayer flags, because Tibetans write prayers on the flag, and then as the wind blows through these prayer flags, they're sending their blessings, all these prayers to throughout the world. They do the same thing with these prayer wheels. Inside there are many, many pieces of paper with scripture on it, and as they spin it, again, those prayers are being sent around the world, and so you see these wonderful temples where they're all walking clockwise, what's called the Kora, spinning wheels, spinning this kind of prayer wheel as well. And I'm inside shooting the lifestyle, and in this case, they're making yak butter tea, which is an acquired taste. But this is my kind of picture. You have to stare at it a while, and then you see this guy's face coming out. It's it's like hiding and revealing when you're shooting this kind of frame, because you're not exactly sure what you're going to get, because there's this constant changing of the light according to this steam that's running in front of your lens. And so we shoot a lot to get one frame. So this is how they pray. This is the most arduous kind of praying that I know of any religion. And so they're starting here, they raise their hands, they take 2 steps forward, and they go flat out. Prostration prayer. They do a push-up, get up, and they do it all again. So I needed to get a picture. I saw these guys walking down the road, and I said, wouldn't it be great if I got them in every step of the prayer in one frame? So these guys are walking towards me. It's raining, and I'm just walking backwards, going click, 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 as these guys are going through this thing. And I get really lucky in one frame. I get this guy on the ground. They're in the middle. They're halfway down and standing. So I got the full extent of the prostration prayer in one frame. It took me about 20, 30 minutes of walking backwards. But again, I didn't tell these guys, I need you to get down on the ground. I need you half standing. No, we are. This is the traffic in the middle of the city. The guy's getting practically run over as they are so intent on their prayers, and they're going to Lhasa, which is the capital city and most sacred monastery temple in Tibet. So this is a pilgrimage, and it's amazing. This prayer all the way 2 or 3 months to Lhasa. Tibet is a wonderful place for just pure air, and these lakes, they obviously don't pollute them. They do nothing but worship them. And so you find a sacred lake, and it's got lots of prayer flags, nobody there. It was when they get there, they walk around the lake, what's called the Kora, and there it's a beautiful country. There is no pollution. A huge problem, a palace, and I need a picture that says 13th century. And if you get there, if anybody's been there, they will see there's a major city around it, and there's cars and traffic, and again, blaring loudspeakers. It's chaos in the front. So again, I drive backwards, and Galen Rolls, one of the greatest of the geographic photographers, has the most famous picture of this. I studied that photograph, and I said, where the heck did Galen shoot this frame from? I realized it was the backside. So I went to the mountain that surrounds Lhasa, and a little bit, and bango, there it is. So I shot. I had no idea there was a lake there. I get this frame showing Potala Palace being reflected in water. Had no idea it was there. And anyway, he describes the monks, 2,000 monks. This is amazing that he would describe these people as heads shaven, and that fact that he also describes what they ate, which is exactly what they eat now, which is a thing called sampa. It's a barley grain that's mixed with butter tea. This picture really works because of the snow. So snow is white, and it's like a big reflector, putting a flash in every one of these. So I shot this frame, and you can see all these faces really clearly. You can spend a lot of time here, and that's thanks to that snow, which has lit up everybody. I like to say, I'm not a tall photographer, so I take a lot of stomach shooting this. And the picture editor looked and said, look at all the saliva coming out of that pipe. I can tell you also the sound is not very wonderful. It's like, and so this picture, actually I did not like the monk this, whose job is to police, especially photographers who get too close to the monks. So behind him, he's got this big stick, and every time I'd try and get up close, he'd bring out this stick and whack me with it. But of course, you're wearing a heavy jacket, so it's not going to hurt you. But he's giving me the evil eye as I'm creeping closer and closer. Anyway, he made a good subject. Yes, okay. This is called a tanka. And again, this must have taken me a half dozen stick to get this close to shoot this frame. Okay, we're going to do the break. I will take you back up here on the Arabian Peninsula to Europe by way of...
I will only keep it. I will only switch.
So don't go away. Is the system on? Oh,
No.
there you go. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to take you back, or not exactly the Marco Polo route, though we'll start on that. I several years later did this story on Zheng He, 15th century Chinese admiral who, anyway, I'll tell you all about him, but this is approximately the route. And in the second story, Zheng He sailed the South China Sea through the Indian Ocean, eventually making it to Africa. And so this is the route I'm going to take you on, 300 years later than Marco Polo. So that's what he looks like, but nobody knows, of course, what he really looks like. But notice he has not Chinese features because he was not Chinese. He was from somewhere in Central Asia. He made 7 trips following these routes from China, not that short, through South China Sea to Sumatra, through the Straits of Malacca to Sri Lanka and the coast of India, and then on to Hormuz and down the Arabian Peninsula, eventually making it here. So all explorers travel the same route, whether it be Marco Polo, Zheng He, or Ibn Battuta. They all have to follow the same route because this is the way the winds go. So the northeast monsoon blows them down here, then they have to wait for the southeast monsoon to blow them this way, and these are all seasonal, so that all the travel of every explorer has been the same. He traveled in these huge boats, 400 feet, more than 100-meter long boats. You could fit this Columbus's 3 ships on the deck of one of these boats. He traveled in a huge fleet of 300 ships. And he came from a landlocked background, nowhere near the sea. He came from this area in Yunnan province, 30 days walk to the sea. He was a Muslim, and these are in his village, and these are Muslims, Chinese Muslims. He, very unlikely person to be leading the world's biggest fleet at the time. So, yeah, this was his background. These are Kazakhs. We don't know exactly what ethnic or tribe he was in, but he comes from somewhere around Tajikistan, Kazakhstan. And he was a eunuch. You know what a eunuch is? Well, he was captured by the Chinese army, and as all young kids, he was about 12 years old, they made him a eunuch, and he then was put into the imperial court under the serving the Yongle Emperor, the second Ming Emperor of China. So this is his village, and again, you're looking at Muslims, a non-Chinese, non-Han Chinese group of people. And because he was a eunuch, he also happened to grow to 7 foot tall and became a great warrior, and that's why I believe that he became the right-hand man of the Emperor of China at 7 foot tall. Yeah. And so then was chosen to be the head of this amazing fleet. So this is his village, again, nowhere near the sea. Just this oddity of here's a guy who eventually is the world's greatest sea traveler who had no background in boats. I figured maybe this was his job when he was a kid, herding ducks. Well, we like to say, we've been talking about the difficulty of organizing our 9 judges because they're photographers. It's like herding cats. Everybody wants to go their own direction. Anyway. And maybe this is as close as he got to the sea, cormorant fishing, which is still happening in China, and that's another thing that Marco Polo didn't mention, so those who don't believe he made it to China say, oh, I never mentioned cormorant fishing. But he did say on his deathbed, Marco Polo said on his deathbed, I only told you half of what I have seen, so maybe he just didn't get around to telling us about that. Anyway, that's the last thing I'm going to talk about Marco Polo. Let's go on to Zheng He. So he's taken as a kid to Beijing, the biggest city in the world. And just to show you the might of this emperor, Zhu Di, the most powerful man, of course, in the world. This stone gives you an idea of how big his ego was. Well, he took the stone out, and this was going to be the base of a statue that he was going to carve out in honor of his father. So he carved out this humongous stone, and then can't figure out how to move it. But the fact that he would try, he wanted to take this block of stone and put it on the ice and send it up to up the Grand Canal, the pictures I showed you, the Grand Canal, to Beijing in order to honor his dad. But his folly was, it was a little too big to transport, let alone cut. So we're on the coast of China, and he's ordered to build the world's greatest fleet. 300 ships, the treasure ships, or the Baoshuan as they call them, were as big as 100 meters. There's never been a wooden ship built that big again. So of course I'm down there shooting everything connected with the sea, and I'm in all the fish markets and wherever they're making boats. So I'm down in the area of where on the coastal China making frames to, again, give you a sense of this history. And so then I'm in the shipyards. The difficulty with the story was it was really hard to find boats with sails. And now it's banned, even making wooden boats in China is banned because wood is precious and it's much cheaper to do in fiberglass or steel or ferroconcrete. So they just don't make wooden boats anymore, and maybe this is one of the last pictures of them actually building a ship hull made out of wood. But it was very difficult to, I thought I'd be spending a lot of time on boats, and instead I was searching for them constantly, especially the boats with sail. This one was found in the mud in a place called Chenzhou, and this is, I go back to Marco Polo because he described this boat from Song Dynasty. He said there are 13 watertight compartments, and there are 2 to 5 layers of planking. This one had 3. So independently, I mean, they found it in the mud, and it's now in a big museum. But the point is that this is something Marco Polo described, and exactly that is what this exists, describing a Song Dynasty boat. The Chinese had the best in the way of marine knowledge, building ships. They had the compass. They knew way before anybody else how to navigate around traveling on the sea. And if the Titanic was built like this, maybe it wouldn't have sunk. So I'm shooting now modern boats because I can't find anything with have junk-like boats, but no hulls. So again, I used silhouette to show numbers of boats, but without the detail. Most of those are fiberglass plastic. And so they go around gathering all the riches of China. So of course that includes tea. By the way, I took 2 years to do Marco Polo. I took a year to do this Zheng He. And so I'm in the Imperial Tea Gardens. I thought because Zheng He is unknown that I should have been given more time to work on that story, and it should have run more pages than Marco Polo, but due to magazine publishing, because everybody knew who Marco Polo is, it became a much bigger story than this unknown, the world's greatest explorer you'd never heard of. And I love shooting in the rain. Rain, especially with green or anything, plants, makes for good pictures. And I did a story on Japanese gardens in which I shot only in the rain, and I've got this love of bad weather. So they gather up all this pottery. China also had porcelain, and no one else had that. And silk, those are silkworms. That's actually cotton. And medicine, meaning that, like for a magazine like National Geographic, everybody reads like this, right? You read flipping pages. Well, I want to have a picture that is going to stop you from page flipping. I want you to see that picture, and it's going to be so compelling with so much impact, either the subject or the light or what quality is, that you're going to stop page flipping and look at the photograph, maybe read the caption, and maybe read the story. Went to the South China Sea in order to show contrast. So I'm in the Philippines. Middle of the day again, just to show that blue-green. And I'm on Hainan Island, and if you are the center of the world, which is China, means middle country, from their point of view, they've always been in the middle of every map. And so if you go to the farthest point south, away from the middle of China, you get to Hainan Island, and they've got this tourist attraction there where everybody goes up to take a picture at the end of the world, which is the furthest point away from the center of China. And they have this rock there where everybody goes to take their picture, and this woman is about ready to get whacked with a big wave. So the first stop is Vietnam. And so everybody goes to this set of islands. I'm blanking on the name of this set of islands. Actually, I'm a little rusty on this particular slideshow because I've been showing a lot of Tibet, which is my most recent project. And so we shoot anything that maybe he would have seen. So if these stilt fishermen are on the coast of Vietnam, then I'm going to shoot them and assume that this is something that Zheng He or Marco Polo might have seen. They use these stilts to go out into the shallow water with a dip net so they can go deeper and hopefully catch more fish. And some of the catch. Layering. We've been talking about layering as among the judges, and that is where you have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, and it gives depth to the photograph and interest in the work, in that you have this perspective up close as well as far distance, and keep it interesting throughout the frame. This is the floating markets in the Mekong Delta. I'm shooting from a bridge. And in Marco Polo's day, in Zheng He's day, all the ships had eyes on the bow. So again, I'm looking for these things to illustrate our story. And so I knew just where I was going to find ships with eyes, and that's in Vietnam. And again, then when you're shooting, you're always looking for separation of the subject. So I'm waiting for the right moment to shoot this boat because it's big in front and center, as well as separate all the other stuff in the background. My daughter is from Vietnam, and we adopted her at a time there because I thought the Vietnamese were so gentle. And here we are on this very crowded waterway, and this boat has maybe this much clearance between the water and the top of the gunnel, but they're so polite because they don't make waves. They don't tip the boats to each other because they're very aware of the fact that these boats are empty. They're not going to come through there and make a big wave and swamp the boat. This would be good for the sun. Is it still time to enter? And monkey bridges. Well, they call them monkey bridges because it takes the agility of a monkey to climb over that thing. And in a go down, so I'm in a rice warehouse where women come to collect the bran for free. Will use to feed the animals, and they use the husk to. There's no wastage of rice, so they use the husk for their fires and the bran to feed the animals, and it's all free. It's the waste product after you collect the rice and polish it. What we like to eat, white rice. And so here's the way they sift it. This is in Laos. But remember this picture because you'll see so many. No matter where you are in the world, everybody does things the same way. Water buffalo surfing. Camera is always out because you never know where the next picture is. So this group of judges, when we go to lunch, everybody has their camera ready just in case something happens. So what's the best camera to own? It's the camera that you have in your pocket on you. This is the best camera it's the camera that you happen to have in your hand. That's the answer. Doesn't matter so much about brand. And very clever, the Vietnamese they love flowers. Again, it's that gentleness about the Vietnamese that I loved. And when we came to adopt a child, I thought Vietnam would be perfect because they're so gentle. They love flowers. They have a very novel way of raising these flowers by putting them on above the water. Nothing is wasted because into these pots and any of the water that's system. So then he goes to Brunei, and in Brunei, he finds, must have been a very happy man because he finds a Muslim community there, from a helicopter, world's most expensive mosque. Sultan of Brunei has spent huge amounts of money on the mosques there. Everything's free. I know some photographers who wear white shirts so that the light reflects off their chest. Now this would be a great candidate for that father's son.
Why you didn't submit it?
Well, I don't think I would have been allowed to, right? By the way, the National Geographic photo department tipped us off about this sent a email to 2016 schedule was announced, and he sent it to National Geographic. So HEPA's been on our radar, and of course it was about the $120,000 grand prize that was being offered. So it is the world's most generous photo. Damn, I should have entered this. Anyway, it must have made Zheng He very happy to be here, being a Muslim. And then, of course, there's Buddhists, and they worship in Thailand. This is Thailand. They worship Zheng He as a god, as a god of prosperity, because he brought all this trade to the region and brought tea and lots of other goods. And he describes, in the case of Zheng He, he didn't have his own book as Marco Polo did, but he had a chronicler, and through those books we know as much as we can about him, but much less information. So again, same thing, I read about it. He says that the king of Thailand goes on elephants, travels on elephants, so I'm there to make a picture. Of course, elephants, the only people on top of them are Japanese tourists. So, but this picture's been done to death. It's a tree that is in Ayutthaya, which was the old capital, which is where Zheng He visited. This is an icon, and anyway. And so again, I'm in these places trying to shoot things differently from anybody else, or I look at a lot of what's done. So I see that everybody shot. There are quite a few of these floating market pictures in contests that I've seen. Everybody shoots it with a lens, so I just think I got to do it differently, and so I take a long lens, this frame, and I like this person with a big expression on her face, and it makes the picture. And then he goes to the coast of Indonesia, and so I get this frame. Again, I have no choice. I'm just staying on the coastline. This Bugis schooner, the Makassar schooner, which Indonesia had the world's biggest sailing fleet up until recently, and again, it's really hard to find ships like this with full sail. And Ijen volcano. So he talks about the gathering of sulfur. So naturally, I'm there to shoot. There's this raging volcano on the southern part of eastern part of Java. And they're still doing it. So they cut these big pieces of sulfur that comes oozing out of the ground. It's very noxious. And carry the surface. And it destroys cameras, by the way. So if you're going to go there, you definitely want to have a nice plastic bag, because whenever the wind blows your way, it's not only is it hard to breathe, but it can ruin the insides of your camera. And he describes cockfighting. You can imagine what they're saying to each other's cocks. So I'm right down, wherever the action is, I like to be right in the middle of it. And so I'm saying, and they're getting these roosters revved up for the battle. And then he talks about the coastline, and well, why didn't he leave? He says that there are people, cannibals, living in the center of Sumatra. They're the Bataks, and indeed, the Bataks existed as cannibals for many years. For editing these pictures out, my picture editor looks at that hand. Let's choose that one. Anyway, they don't eat people there anymore. They're very Christian. And so I was telling you about this Eurocentric view of the world. So what we're taught to believe that like and Vasco da Gama discovered Asia and China. Well, trade was going on for 1,000 years, mostly by the Arab traders, the Arab merchants. They had a permanent base in Sumatra, in Medan. And to this day, there's a whole enclave of Arab merchants still living in the middle of the city, actually not in the middle of the city, on the water. And so they are very Muslim, and they have, here's at a wedding. But this idea of the West discovering the East is just that this is the way we perceive the world. But this trade was going on between Indonesians and Arabs and Indians and Africans, and Chinese. This very vibrant trade going on already 1,000 years, and the Arab traders had been. So we needed a picture to illustrate Malacca. If anybody's been to Malacca, it's one of the most boring towns around because it's become totally touristic. But in doing the research, we figured that since it was the first depot for Zheng He, he would stop between trips from South China Sea to the Indian Ocean, and he'd stockpile everything in Malacca. And so a lot of the ethnic Chinese there, we believe, were Zheng He sailors who ended up settling there. So we thought going after the Chinese community, finding a picture was fair game. And so I heard that the most extreme festival, there were a lot of Chinese, Han Chinese people, now that they're called Peranakan, overseas Chinese who settled in Malacca. They have adopted the local customs to the point where they're doing this very arduous Indian festival where they're skewering themselves in thanks to prayers from the gods. They worship an Indian god. So they said this wasn't painful, but I find that hard to believe. So it was a spectacular way to show overseas, to the first settlers in, first immigrants outside of China who were in Malacca. These are their descendants. So I shot this very extreme festival. And this is the picture that we ran. I think when we ran the picture, we cut out the shell at the top. But again, this is vision, so I have this idea. I see this going on, so I need to be close and tell the whole story in one picture. So I'm in here. I want to show this detail. And then I want to show how this guy's Chinese also, to show the on the street. So I'm here. I already had this in mind. I saw it, and as soon as this is the picture I knew I wanted, and I worked it till I got there by following these guys and coming up every time I could see a nice background, could be easily seen, and get this big foreground. That was my vision. And finally, we find sails in Sri Lanka. I went nuts on this beach. Here were these wonderful fishing boats coming in with sails. Adams Peak. Adams Peak is, every explorer has mentioned Adams Peak. Even Batuta talks about it. Zheng He talks about it. Marco Polo talks about it. Religions that worship at the top of that mountain where there is a footprint. It's big. It's this big. But if you're Christian, you think it's Adam's footprint. If you're Muslim, you think it's Muhammad's footprint. If you're Indian, you think it's Krishna's footprint. But all three religions worship in peace at the top of this mountain. So I knew I had to have a photograph of it. About 3 hours by car from Colombo, the capital, and I drove down there, got there in the evening, and we climbed all night, and I got to the top for the sunrise, and the sun never showed. So I was very disappointed, but I knew I needed to have a great picture. I left my cell phone at the top. I climbed back down, went back to Colombo. We had a helicopter waiting for us at sunrise, 6 a.m. And I left my cell phone at the top with the priest, and I called him up and I said, "What's the light like? Is the sun up?" He said, "Well, it's better than yesterday." So on that news, we took to the air, and you're there in 30 minutes as the crow flies, as the helicopter flies. And as I got closer, I saw these swirling cloud filling this mountain. I went around it 3 times, emptied 3 liters with 3 rolls of film, and had my picture. But again, helicopter time is expensive. I didn't want to waste it. I did what was necessary in order to guarantee that we got a picture. Zheng He was very progressive. He was a modern man. He believed in freedom of religion. He left a stela, a stone tablet, where he describes this mountain and the fact that 3 religions worship up there. And this is the same time as the Inquisition, where there was, not Inquisition, the Crusades, where Muslims and Christians were fighting in Europe. Here in the Zheng He is talking about the equality of religions. He was a modern man, partly because he was also not so. He believed in the equality of man. They have some of the greatest gems, Sri Lanka, and so this is where they're mined at the foot. Again, I'm in the middle of that whole thing, looking to make a picture with SIG where you can see the. You got to tell these stories. You'd have 2 or 3 to put in a spread, but not these days. You need to tell the whole story in one frame. If you notice in your magazines, everybody run one picture big. And so when he talks about the Buddha relic, the Buddha's tooth, and in the town of Kandy, it's about that big. But this is supposed to be Buddha's tooth, and every year they have a festival, the Perahera, where it lasts for 10 days, and they parade this tooth around the town. In Zheng He chronicles that I read, he supposedly steals the tooth and brings it back to China. The Sri Lankans don't believe that, since otherwise there would be no reason for the festival. And this is, of course, would have been a piece of cake. Now, film is tough to shoot this without lighting. So I'm using just a little strobe to light whatever and picking up the background light, but much simpler. Yeah, there's more elephants there than anywhere in the world, kilometer, square meter. So then I go to India, as every traveler, every explorer does. And boy, I thought this would be a great cover, geographic yellow, blue background. And that's the point is, we don't set up except for the portrait, which by its very nature, by its definition, you need to set that and control your subject. And it's the only place where we say, hey, can you sit here? Can you do this? Can you look at me? So I got to this place in Kerala looking for a picture. See, of course, I never left the coastline on this story. Always on the coast looking for something. and we saw this boat being put in the water, no oars, motors, which made me really happy. And its moon is rising. Said, so what's going to be here in the moon? Come photograph you guys. Be a few boats. Whoops. Sorry, there's a mix-up here. Where I was going to show you a lot of boats, but this is the catch where they are taking the. Zheng He describes the families as being working together, and the men pull the nets, and the women get inside, and even the little kids take part. And he also just get. So we ran this picture. My God! So I'm missing a picture. I haven't landed. And boat of maybe 3 of them, battered old boats, and Zheng He was offshore with 300, like a floating city. You can just imagine the attention that the Chinese fleet got versus the European explorers in the Age of Discovery. Oh, there it is. Again, it's the need for separation, so I'm up high, I'm standing on the top of one of these in order to separate the 15th century. And that's the way they go out to sea. These boats, again, no motors, just those big heavy oars. And so we're back in sequence here. So here's the nets. Again, I'm looking for foreground interest and foreground, middle, and background. Got that great hand. He mentions copra because in order to build ships, they needed the coconut husk to make them watertight by taking that husk and putting it in all the crevices of the plank. And he out, of course, the spice, black gold. And the funny thing is the BBC had been here before me, and I had to really negotiate to shoot these women because in a BBC documentary on Kerala, they happened to show women with bare feet standing on top of black peppercorns, and the Brits obviously did not like that, so they lost business. So I was allowed to shoot this as long as I didn't the bare feet of these women standing on top on a daily basis. They move quite slower than the Chinese version. And this is where Chinese Kung Fu came from, India. And so we say goodbye across the Indian Ocean, and I wind up in Yemen, which I loved, and I'd love to go back. In 2005, when I was here, it was still deemed to be dangerous, though we didn't find it. We went way out of their way to make sure. And it is just a wonderful place because things haven't changed there since Zheng He went. Yeah, they live in these amazing apartments. And so then we went to Hodeidah, where there's the world's biggest shark market because of the Chinese interest in sharks. Oman to shoot the dhows, but again, couldn't find anything with sail. So this is my best picture of that, but again, without the sail, I'm kind of missing something. It's the only place I know where everybody still wears totally traditional dress, and the men carry these daggers in their belts. That was a wedding celebration. But I mean, you know, it was great pictures for me to be sitting there, and I basically tried to be a fly on the wall. I stand on the side amongst the guys who are selling stuff, and every once pop a picture, but this, again, my job is to give you the illusion of travel as it was, in this case, 500 years ago. So we did find a dhow eventually, a tourist dhow that sails off the coast of Africa, the Swahili coast. Shot these pictures, and again, trying to leave out the fact that he's wearing a Bob Marley T-shirt. I cut him off at the waist and framed the background. So I'm there after Ramadan. I forgot what's the day? Eid. And so everybody's dressed in their finest. Zheng He supposedly had a shipwreck here, and the sailors ended up living on the Swahili coast. And so I went there, and people were saying, they have pottery shards from Ming Dynasty pottery. And so they believe they are the descendants of Zheng He sailors and Miss Chinese. I can't tell. So I actually took a piece of her hair and brought it back to test for DNA. And unfortunately, we couldn't find any connection with China. But they believe it. I wouldn't be the person to tell them that they descended from Chinese. But apparently, the Chinese embassy in Kenya had been there also just. But you look at these people and you say, why not? They're mixed races. There were Arab traders there. There were Indonesian, Chinese, there were Indians, and you get this beautiful mix and beautiful faces of these people. So I have to believe that story. And so I had a great time in great light shooting these local residents. And so he says goodbye. 7th voyage, he's in Zanzibar, and it's the end of my trip as well. 7 voyages over a period of about 15 years, and he dies on the trip back from Zanzibar after the 7th trip. That's basically what I'm talking. What this picture here is saying goodbye, and he goes back to China. China makes the worst possible decision in the history of the world. He dies. The government decides we're not going to spend any more money on these voyages. China could have totally ruled the world. Instead, they turned back, destroyed the fleet, built more of the Great Wall, closed themselves in, did not let people in or out, and it took how many years later, with the the Olympics in 2000, for China to again ascend to where they were back in the 15th century. And that's the end of my story. Thank you very much. Any questions? Excuse me? Well, the last picture, I want to tell you about, I'm going to show you the building of the Great Wall, because that's what they did. They destroyed the logs. They built the Great Wall, but we're not going to get into that. So we got 15 minutes for questions, if there are any. Yes?
You mentioned criteria in your judging for pictures. You
Yeah.
said the 3 criteria, and then I heard impact or stopping, but I
Yeah,
didn't hear the
I didn't
others.
quite finish that thought. We look at 3 things. One is light, of course, composition, and moment. The moment is the time when you click the shutter, what's going on. Of what the photograph I want, I work around this till I see that here and click. I know when I have it. I've already envisioned it here, but I need good light, in my case color, a strong graphic composition, and a moment. So that's sort of what we're looking at when we're doing the judging, is those qualities. A good photograph. When it all comes together is when you got something great, with impact, with stopping power. Yes.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have seen that you made a lot of photo on Med Day. Have you used Flash?
Yes, I love
You-
flash. I like to pop a little
Yeah.
bit of flash in there.
So you like to use the Flash with the photo?
I like
most
to
of the time?
shoot people pictures with a little bit flash. It gives a, but you can't see it. That's the
Yeah,
point.
I noticed
You can
that.
feel it, but you can't see it. So I use a very gentle, small amount of flash. It gives a little catch light to the eye, brings up some shadow. But what I like about it, again, it gives life to the eyes. And so I like to pop a little bit of flash into my people photography.
Okay. I'm sure you were very frustrated to find your picture on in New York, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So basically, what are the steps you can use to protect your intellectual property, or what can you do in such a case if it happens to any of us? Hopefully.
Well, it's interesting because we came from the National Geographic Photographer Seminar, which happens every year, and it's the gathering of all the photographers. And there was a lawyer. We had a lawyer to explain to us about protecting your copyright. And on Instagram, for example, you notice I put a watermark, small picture, small either copyright notice or something with my name on it. And they told us actually that it's not necessary because, and somebody rips it off, you can sue them, person who's done the infraction, and that's unfortunate, but it happens every day, and so you have to weigh your consequences. Is it worth going after every copyright infringement? Most of the cases are not commercial in nature, and so there's, you know, maybe you're supposed to feel somebody is using it for their screensaver. Excuse me? Did I?
Did you buy it?
Oh God, everybody got one for Christmas that year. Yeah, I bought at big discount. Hey, that's my picture. Okay, well, if you buy 100, you can get 20% off. Yes.
Hi, Michael. How do you see post-processing in your photography?
Yeah, I'm not a Photoshop who does Lightroom, Photoshop. And that's what I've always been. I never process my film. And same thing with digital. I download it in the field. We use Photo Mechanics. Some people use Lightroom, but it's and we go back to Washington, or we go back and the tweaking, but we don't tweak. And so usually I shoot a raw file with a JPEG, and the JPEG becomes the reality because it's, well, in my case, I'm using Sony, and that JPEG is my memory of what the photograph actually looked like. As you know, the raw file is dull to see. So I usually tell the technicians match the JPEG.
You're always talking about a lot on.
Yeah, serendipity.
How much time you spend on it? And what tips you could give us to take such great photos like that? It's been revealing. I mean, you just wait for it, or you give a time frame for it.
Well, you got to invest the time. There's no question about it. You need to commit to the subject, and you're going to something that satisfies you, and sometimes you don't get it at all. And so then you're going to go to the next place, and you find a similar subject, and you're going to shoot it again. So it's not, there's nothing fixed, but the more time you have, the greater chance you're going to luck out and get the right light and the right subject in the right situation to make that moment. And so you can't argue with time spent. And also, you're trying to make your own luck by being there at the right time. So if a photograph requires, like a landscape requires light, and you are definitely going to get up for every sunrise and every sunset to maximize those chances of seeing the subject in the best light. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, when you start a new journey, a new project, I would like to know if you, from National Geographic, for example, you have some goal to achieve, or for example, you start to capture the moments when you're running and you have a story to tell after the journey.
It's a huge commitment. You do a lot of research. Even though the Geographic has been generous in the time given to you, so if they give you a month or a year or a half a year, in the case of Marco Polo, 2 years, but I went through a dozen countries, and so your time is very short. Maybe if you added up all the time that you spent in each country, it comes to more like weeks. You know, so your time is so precious that you got to make the most of every bit of it. And so we work 24 break. You're working the light and the subject, and you're going no rest. You're just hitting it hard. But that research is, it's not like being a tourist where you arrive somewhere and look around for a picture. No, you're only going to where you're going because you know the picture is there. It's like a hunt of what I want to shoot, and so I go there and then put it in the camera, either on film or in digital, because I'm illustrating some point for the story. Yeah, it's not random. You are on a hunt. You know what the why you're going there is you know you're going to make a picture, and it makes a big difference. Yeah, but it's not luck. It's hard work, and then you're hoping for that serendipity. It just happened to elevate your photograph beyond what you are expecting. Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time. It was an honor to hear about you and your commitment to the time with the subject. Or just you have the sense that this is the time, just one shot and it's done.
Well, we were never limited to the amount of shot. So we had a huge, generous film budget because I never thought, oh, I have to conserve because it's costing too much. No, I just blew the whole roll, usually on one subject. So we thought we shot a lot. So maybe the average story was 800 rolls of film. Maybe for Marco Polo, I shot 2,000. But I guarantee you now, we shoot 3 or 4 times as much.
Yeah.
Because you can, and it's free, and you don't miss a moment. The great thing about today's camera is you are not going to miss the moment. You're going to, I'm shooting 3 frames at a time, and I'm shooting everything.
Okay, second question.
Yeah.
After all these achievements, your next target, what is it?
Well, so you develop a passion for a subject. I spent the last Tibetan world. I did 3 assignments that took me back to the region again and again to, because every time you go, you get something new. And so I have a book called Shangri-La on Tibet, focused on the environment and national parks. You'll see in National Geographic this year, there's going to be a large issue is going to have something about national parks. And because my area of interest and expertise is China, I want to do Chinese national parks, what China is doing to preserve their natural treasures in a place that's very polluted. How are they going to save these vistas and nature? And so there was an article last year about Institute partnering with the Chinese government, a national park system based on the American system. And so that going for the next, I already have several covered, but I want to do them all. And that's
Thank you, Michael. There's a question I've asked many of your colleagues. Me? Sorry. There's a question I've asked some of your National Geographic colleagues in the past, and it's as simple as, what are your 3 most important tips for aspiring photographers? For example, we'll say, working the light. We'll say persistence. Reza will shoes. What are your top tips?
Oh my God. For me, it's all about the vision and passion. And you find a subject you shoot. It's not, we're all professionals and we work to make a living and feed our family. But we do it for love. And I don't think there's a photographer, geographic photographer in the room that says they do it for anything but their passion for the subject. And then after the passion that focuses you in on doing this work, then it's up to you and your vision to make your work stand out and be different from your colleagues in my case.
Yes. You spoke about these staged shots in the competition entries, yeah? The stage shots in the competition.
Stage shots, yeah.
So as a judge, do you dislike or frown upon such entries, or advise the participants to do?
Well, again, you almost can feel if it's staged, and it's not real. That's the problem. So if you're shooting for a moment, it's got to be something that is natural. If you have to set it up and tell your subject to do this way or to look this way, look in a particular, then it's not real. And
but what about the model release form? So if I shoot strangers, a candid moment, and submit a photograph.
Well, here's an example
for a model release form. So how do I get a model release form in that case?
I've been working in Myanmar recently. And Myanmar is interesting because it's a new destination, and of course it's wildly popular now among tourists. And the Burmese, the Myanmar people, have figured this out. So everything there is a photo op. It's something they arranged. And I saw many pictures in the contest from Myanmar, and I've been there. So I know that if you go to this monastery, the monks are going to sit in that round window, and everybody's going to shoot the same picture. And then you go to inland, and you got those guys on the boats with steering with their back feet. Well, they're all arranged by tourist organizations, and they go through an elaborate dance with these nets. You've seen the picture, I'm sure, and they're all wearing pantaloons and white shirts. So I had trouble shooting that. And of course, I happened to be there with a workshop, and I didn't even bother critiquing those photographs, because if you didn't get it, picture, you may as well give up, because it was too simple. But that's the problem these days, is so much, anything photogenic. It's okay, therefore, if you publish it and say what it is, that it's an act put on for tourism. And that's the only way I could feel comfortable showing that picture. I would mention the fact that these guys were fishermen who preferred making a living or made a better living by posing for pictures than by actually catching fish. And it made me feel much better about photographing it and using it and displaying it in some way. So you can't, anyway. Oh yeah, the model release. Oh, okay. Well, that's something you get later. Cartier-Bresson didn't make the decisive moment by asking somebody to take a picture. But usually, in my case, I'm traveling with my fixer, who, after the fact got it, will at least get their name and stuff like, and maybe an address, and I'll promise to send them a picture. But yeah, that's where the model release comes in. But you get it after. I don't ask people to take, can I take your picture? I know I'd probably be in trouble in this part of the world. But I click first, and in the back that moves around now is such an advantage. It's a game changer, because I find I shoot most people pictures like this. And so nobody's thinking I'm taking their picture. They don't react. You got to bring it this way, and everybody goes, whoa, don't do that. But here, you know, a lot of these pictures I'm taking this way now, and it's really changed the game. Thank you very much.
Okay, everybody, thank you very much for coming today, and be ready for the lecture of after tomorrow for Maggie Stepper. And we would like to invite Ms. Sahar Al-Zar'i to give a certificate, and thank you for Mike.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Sahar, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. For a long time I didn't attend such an event.
Thank you.
You will find evaluation form in your inbox. Please don't hesitate to write whatever you want to.
You want to turn around.
Give us
You
the
got
opportunity
light,
to
light
enhance
on the
always
lens?
our
Light on the lens. Maybe
be
you wanna
upon
turn
your
the other way?
expectations. Please collect your certificate before you.
Easier, better picture. You got it? Okay, okay. Good.
Sure?
Thank
You
you.
don't want to try? Try one.
Well, you got my picture in the background. There you go. Thank you. Good. Thank you very much.
Let's say 5 years.
Excuse me?
For me, for over the last 5 years,
Yeah.
I didn't attend a lecture that grabbed my attention like today.
Oh, thank you.
That's really good.
Good, thank you. Yes, sure, sure. You guys are from Philippines?
Yes.
Ah. I know there are many Filipinos here.
Yeah, okay. That's good. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, you may. Light good? Monica, is this? It's kind of bright.
Yeah, it's kind of dry.
Yeah, let's move this way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's much better.
Okay, let's go.